Thank you for actually taking some time out of your night tonight, Sam, for to talk to us about what's going on in the world right now.
You are welcome.
Am I?
Hounded me, but we got it done.
Yeah. Well, I think what you have to say is, or at least your expertise. I don't know about what you have to say, but I think that your expertise in the world of small business is particularly relevant right now. I mean, you spent a pretty decent amount of time in the retirement space. You're now in a uh, small business consulting space with the same company, and you see a lot of different businesses. It's certainly a lot more than what the average person would ever interact with on the level that you interact with them. So what exactly do you do right now?
So right now, I am a HR consultant for small businesses, and HR is kind of a broad term. But really, what I speak to businesses more about, and I think it's a little bit more relevant, is a lot about productivity and how efficient and effective they are. Just in the sense that a lot of business owners get into doing what they do because they're good at doing something. Like, so the best example I could give is, an electrician goes to trade school. They're an electrician. They're really good at being an electrician, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know how to run a business, because when you open a business and you get into it, there's a lot more that comes into play. Employee management, insurances, handbooks, policies, procedures, all these different things that most individuals that go into starting a business to start a business, they're not good at. That's not their expertise. They just want to do what they do and do it well. So that's when what I do kind of becomes relevant, because what we do is help small business owners be better at running a business versus them working for their business rather than on it, if that makes sense. And one of my favorite small business owners is right here. He just popped in.
What's up, buddy?
Hey, Jeff, how's it going?
Good. Frankie Falco live, huh?
Yeah, we're live right now. So how do you help? What's that look like? How do you help smaller businesses be better about the other things other than just running their business, whether it be electrician, a party rental company, so on and so forth? What do you do that helps them to set themselves apart from the guy across the street? Or
I think what it does is, I think it boils down to taking things off their plate and then also doing things better that are not necessarily in their wheelhouse.
Like what?
Well, when you think about something like interviewing or doing a great example would be like a performance evaluation. A performance evaluation is the most awkward conversation you can have with an employee.
Sure, absolutely.
Whether you're having the conversation to give recognition, because that doesn't necessarily come natural to people, like saying, "You did a great job, buddy." Like, that's weird. Like an adult speaking to another adult in that way, it's almost very grammar schoolish, right? So it's
yeah,
weird.
absolutely.
So
I mean, no, I'm
right.
sorry.
No, you're fine. So giving recognition is hard for people, but then also those disciplinary conversations or telling someone where they're underperforming and they need improvement, it's super awkward. Nobody likes to do it. It's not fun. So it could be something as basic as that, because that's not something a guy that went to go be an electrician knows how to do. Like, they don't know how to conduct a proficient performance evaluation. They don't know how to have a disciplinary conversation that not only makes a point, but results in improvement, right? So you can have a conversation with them where you tell somebody everything they did wrong, but how does that necessarily correlate to improvement? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you do how do you coach someone to have that conversation, have it well, and then also have there still be action items at the end of that conversation so that it doesn't all go to waste and so that they get something out of it aside from just a lashing.
So not to pass the buck, but in a nutshell, that's what I sell. I don't sell the answers. I sell a solution. If that I don't know if that's the fair way to say it, but I sell a service
one
model
sense,
where somebody comes in and helps you with those things,
okay.
versus us giving you the tools or telling you what to do. We help you kind of establish some sort of an infrastructure or a way that you're going to do those things or conduct your business, versus, I think in a nutshell, really it comes down to just learning how to even conduct one of those conversations, because people don't know how. And I think it comes into play for preparation. So creating some sort of a structure of, okay, this is what we're going to talk to them about. This is what needs improvement. And it can be collaborative, right? So you may be speaking to the person that you're having this conversation with, and it can be a way of you to say, what do you think that you need to be better? And letting it be collaborative. So I don't think the answer is as black and white as you think. I think it's just.
So this isn't really a one size fits all type of solution for, every business should be doing X, Y, and Z, and this is what it takes to be successful. This is what it takes to cover your bases or things like that. It's really more of you're building out a solution for them, where you're selling the service that builds out a solution that's unique to what they're doing.
Or helps them get there, because
right.
The answer, to your point exactly, there is no one size fits all solution. Every business is different. Every business owner is different. Every person is different. Everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has a different way that they want to see their business operate. Some people are quality versus quantity, or some people are quantity versus quality. I don't know. It really just depends on your business. If you're the sort of business that's looking at profit margins and being really strategic, or maybe you're the sort of business that's like, let me just take as many jobs as I can, and there's just not a strategic approach to it. That happens. I mean, luckily for me, one of the hugest advantages that I have, being I work for a company that sells solutions to small, medium-sized businesses. The best advantage that I have is the fact that my husband owns a small business. So I get to see both sides of the coin, in the sense that I come from corporate America, and we can kind of just have whatever perception of reality we have. But then there's the other side of the coin of that my husband owns a small business, and that's the reality. Like, he's dealing with.
How long have you been involved with that your husband's business?
We opened our business in 2010, and I was involved with his small business at the fruition. And then I kind of stepped away, and he ran it like his baby. And then he experienced a lot of growth very quickly. And if you don't grow or you don't adapt, you die. And he knew that. He knew it was becoming overwhelming for him, and he was either going to figure it out. He was either going to accommodate that growth, or he was going to fail. And I actually took some time away from the company that I work for to help him with that specifically. Like, that's all I did.
What do you think, I apologize for interrupting, but what do you think caused such explosive growth after that period of time that he needed to be able to adapt?
He took every job he could for a while.
So he was on the strategy of, we're just going to pump out volume as much as we possibly can. And,
he has an illness. I say it all the time. He has an illness of he does not know how to say no in many facets of his life. He does not know how to limit himself and say, he doesn't know how to look at something and say, like, that's probably not a good, best use of my time. He just says yes. It's like, yes, 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 yes. And the good will follow. And I think that's an illness a lot of small business owners suffer from, because when you start a business, you're just like, how do I say no to business?
Well, sure. I mean, you
Couldn't
hear all
even
these scary
fathom.
statistics that like all these businesses fail, and your percentage of success in the first few years is so minuscule, and all this stuff. It almost makes you question why anyone would want to become a small
Oh,
business owner. And then once you've made the leap and you have to make it work, I don't know that I don't know that I would have been able to consciously have done it differently if I was in his shoes and turned away business that um, may not have been the best fit for what was going on. Even though from an outsider's standpoint, I can say, well, here's where you're losing efficiency. Here's where this is kind of hurting you.
where you're looking at
But
profit margins.
right, you're looking at exactly. It's easy for us to look at a piece of paper on a spreadsheet and say, well, you should really be doing this instead of that. And we're not really, well, I'm not. You were in the trenches with him for a while, actually helping run the business. And I can only imagine what that's like, having to make those difficult decisions. How do you decide what gets priority?
Um, in terms of making difficult decisions, I think ultimately it's so silly. I go back to the basics and I say a pros and cons list. I still support it to this day.
Do you actually write out a list?
I do. I'm a
Okay.
huge believer in a pros and cons list before making any big decision. Sometimes sometimes it can be a decision that's not that big and you're just running through it mentally in your head.
Right.
But like, I'm a big advocate for the pros and cons list. Okay, sounds good. Before we've made some really big decisions, it's usually collaborative too. I'm a huge advocate of collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, between myself and my husband, we've been able to bounce things off each other. We've been a really good team. Does every husband and wife duo in a business work? No.
Well, I would say more often than not, it doesn't.
Yeah, I would agree. And does it take away some aspects of our marital life? I'm sure. But because I've joked with him and I've said, I feel like all we talk about is the business. And there's so many other things for us to talk about. I mean, we have 2 beautiful children, but above and beyond that, I think that we often lose sight of our relationship, but that's a completely different other topic.
We're not gonna try.
No, we're not gonna go into that rabbit hole today.
No.
But we usually are good because we bounce things off each other. But he's an advocate now for the pros and cons list because of me. I've said we need to just look at the benefits versus
just diving in.
Like, we just have to look at the benefits versus the negatives. And there are going to be times when you look at it on paper and you can say those negatives are so big they outweigh the positives, or maybe they don't follow a belief that you have, or something that you feel really strongly about. I mean, that happens all the time too. We've looked at things where, we joke to this day, like, when everything happened with the coronavirus, we could have closed our business and walked away, because a major conversation that has to be had because of coronavirus for small business owners is, how much good money are you going to put into bad? That's seriously something that has to be said.
How do you mean? How much good money you're going to put into bad?
There are business owners that are taking their own personal money, that you at the end of the day, you earn what you earn from your business and it goes into your personal life, right? Like,
sure.
You look at like 2 buckets.
Yeah,
you have
absolutely.
Your business and you have your personal. So you take the money you make from your business and you put it into your personal, and that's your income. Everybody's entitled to make a living, right?
Yeah, I mean, you go into business so that you can either make money, provide for your family, because you love what you're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, you have needs. You have to be able to afford your mortgage, put food on the table. You mentioned that you have kids. You're eventually going to have to potentially put them through college or through school. So yeah, you're absolutely entitled to
So when
the
I
money
say
that you
good
earn.
money, what I mean is how much of that money am I going to take out of my personal life? That money that I'm using to pay for my kids' college fund, am I going
Mhm.
to take to sustain my business that is failing? Also because of things that are out of my control. The coronavirus was out of my control. And I'm not advocating for bankruptcy because the reality is bankruptcy is a game changer.
Yeah.
You cannot reuse your name. My husband just built a name over the course of 10 years that has value. The ratio of repeat business that we have is huge. And when you're a consumer, you're lost in the trenches of figuring out a vendor or where to buy. That you find things however you find things as a consumer, but they will maybe not find me again if I change my name. How do I manage that? So there's the pros and cons list that I literally had to go through quite recently in terms of my husband who was an advocate for filing for bankruptcy. So I had to say, okay, so coronavirus hits. This is how much we're going to lose potentially. We were probably at $100,000 that we were losing because of
Right.
coronavirus. This is
That's
a
not a
lot.
small amount of money. That's $100,000 is a lot of money to a lot of people.
And it probably was more than that if we were to really dig into the numbers, because that's just the amount of accounts that canceled. That's just the value of
So that $100,000 was
cost
business.
that was incurred.
Right. But so when you say $100,000 and that was just the business that was canceled, you're talking about people that had made appointments, and canceled them. And that's not necessarily accounting for the amount of money that you have to spend just to keep your rent on a warehouse or,
Right.
Payroll, things like
Right.
that
That's not
you're just
even
looking straight up on canceled business.
100%. So it was much more than that.
Yeah, I'd be
And if
surprised
Jeff
if it
were
wasn't.
here, my husband was here right now, and I said $100,000, he would probably scoff and say it's closer to two.
He's probably not wrong.
He's not wrong. He has much more of a realistic. I'm more on the outside now at this point in our life. And it's sad because we even joke about it. I look at the people on payroll like numbers because I don't know them like I used to. I used to see the people and I used to know them and I used to shake hands with them. But now I just look at them and I'm just like, that's the last four. I know the last four of your social.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like you're a check.
they're just a number to me now because I rarely even meet them.
Right.
It's also good because when I have to get involved, there's no bias.
It's almost like when he brings you in to drop the hammer. It's like yeah.
Right. I am the awkward conversation queen.
Yeah.
I'm brought in when an awkward conversation needs to be had because I'm also just very good at compartmentalizing. And I can look at the facts and I can just look at things in black and white. Here comes my son. Hold on. Yes.
Sure.
I cannot cook you beans. You had dinner. There's a bowl of beans and rice on the counter for you that you can eat. No. They're not white beans.
So now with that, in your position at work, you see not just your own business, you see hundreds a year, I would imagine. Is there a trait that has allowed a trait or an industry, assuming that they were required to be one of the non-essential businesses that was shut down during this whole thing, is there a trade or a specific thing that businesses are doing right now that is allowing them to survive? Like, what was the determining factor for your business, for, all these different companies that you see, that allowed them to make the decision to press forward or cause them to make the decision to fold up?
I think that a lot of that was dictated by the outside. I think that there's businesses, if you had an e-commerce capacity to any degree, you were good.
Okay.
And maybe that's an advocate of the time, like saying you need to adapt to where we are. Even prior to COVID, I think if you had an e-commerce perspective of your business in some degree, that you were sustainable. If you could have a business where you did not have direct contact with people, you could have, like landscapers, they did not get impacted because they did not have to have contact with people and they worked on the outside. I think that the businesses and even restaurants, and I can appreciate what happened to restaurants. Like it's awful. What happened
Yeah.
at all these businesses is awful. But at the same degree, I also can say restaurants had the opportunity to adapt. And if they didn't, I'm sorry, but you're an asshole. You're lazy and you're an asshole. Restaurants had the opportunity to adapt. They could have done takeout. There were so many things that they could have done.
What about bars?
They allowed for takeout cocktails. I mean, if you were smart, you could figure it out. But the other thing that you have to understand that is if you completely shut down and you took advantage of the allowances that were being extended to you, you can sustain. I do feel that way to a certain degree. If you completely shut your shit down, and I am not trying to be like vulgar in any way, but you had to shut it down. If you're renting, you call your landlord and you say, hey, guess what? Got hit by the coronavirus. Need a break. They were legally required to give you a break. They got a break on their mortgage. They got a forbearance on their mortgage.
Sure.
So that could have happened. There are people that could have completely shut down. To circle back to the point where I made, where how much good money you're going to put into bad is how much debt were you willing to incur to keep it? Because you're going to incur some debt.
Sure.
And there's people that are comfortable with it. There are people that are not comfortable with it. That was really just the reality of the situation. The bars are definitely the problem, especially if their one in is drinks. Like if that's the only thing they can do is drinking, then yeah, it's a problem. If you were a bar that served food and you could do takeout, you've got to win. I think that in adversity, the best in us comes out. I truly believe in that. I think people are their most creative and people adapt when you're put in the most egregious situation. And the people that are true entrepreneurs, and maybe I'm an asshole when I say this, that deserve success are the ones that are going to figure it the fuck out. And
I don't think you're an asshole at all in saying that. I think that, obviously this is my personal opinion, but you go into business, you know the risks, there's no easy way to make it. If you want a sure thing, go work for someone else.
Exactly.
Go get a regular job.
Exactly.
I don't want to sound cold, but that we operate in more or less a capitalist society, and that basically involves survival of the fittest. And if you don't want to be in that world, then you have to go work for somebody else and let them take on that risk. I think that some of the most creative solutions that we've seen have come out of this whole thing. For example, the takeout cocktails that we all enjoy.
I think you see the best of people in adverse situations, even the goodness that you've seen in people, the charity work, I'm a huge, I'm a big fan of Lisa Vanderpump. And she owns a bar called Tom Tom, and the two gentlemen that are part owners in Tom Tom did like an Instagram thing, and they raised $50,000 to give to their bar and restaurant staff. I mean, you see goodness in people that does not happen every day. And it's true in that in adversity, the best comes out. I mean, it really is. I mean, think about the things. Think about the companies that were started during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens. Awful things happen in this world, and people figure it out. And that's part of, I feel like we're losing sight of that sometimes. I feel like some of these things, people feel like some of these things should be done for them. But the reality is that that's not the case. We need to come up with these things for ourselves.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, and that's an interesting thing to say coming from someone who essentially is, in a lot of ways, coaching businesses on how to do things like that. How do you have that conversation with a business owner where they're weighing all these options and they're leaning towards, shutting everything down, declaring bankruptcy, and walking away, and you see something viable? How do you snap them back to reality, and or do you?
Well, from a liability standpoint, I would never coach somebody on whether or not they should file for bankruptcy. But I definitely talk to them more about their business in terms of where their problems lie. Like I said, I was on the phone with somebody today and I was like, you know your business better than me. What do you see wrong with it? You know what I mean? Like I could sit here and dictate what's wrong about your business to you all day, and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. What do you think is wrong with your business? Because the reality is they know. If you have that conversation, they know.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that situation, where does your company come in? Is it what's wrong but you don't know how to fix it, or is it what's wrong and we have the solution for it?
It's not that
or any
you know
combination
it's wrong and you don't have the solution. It's that you don't have the time or resources. That's the situation. It's not, and I said this to the woman that I spoke to today. I was like, you're doing all the right things, or you're trying to. Like a lot of people, the intent is good, right? Like assume positive intent. The intent is good. Most people want to do it the right way. Most people are not like, you know what? I'm going to run a shitty business.
Well, yeah. When you say do it the right way, I don't think, I'm going to run a shitty business. I think of people being a little bit more cutthroat than they need to be, or being a little bit
no,
shady.
I think they're gonna run a shitty business where they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And it's only because they don't have the time or the resources or the expertise. Because again, Joe, the electrician, just knows about electrical work. He doesn't know how to communicate effectively. He doesn't know about workers' comp or state unemployment tax rates. That's not his wheelhouse. And we would be unfair to expect that of him. Because quite frankly, jack of all trades, master at none, right?
Sure. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
The other side of it is if you do want to run a business, there is a certain level of accountability that you should have in running an effective business. And when I say that, it means there should be things that you realize that you cannot do, or you don't know, or weaknesses that you have. And that's okay. And that's when you lean on others or you look for support elsewhere. The problem that I see happening is people not admitting that or knowing that, or just egocentric and trying to think that they can do it on their own. And that's not the case. And the sooner you can...
I think we're losing you. You just cut out there.
None of us know what we're doing, right? We're good at what we do.
Wait a minute. I need you to backtrack. You cut out. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
All right, go for it. We lost you at whatever that drink is.
This is a grapefruit Pellegrino and vodka. It's my drink of the coronavirus, quite frankly.
That's another thing that's been going on is liquor stores. If you own a liquor store, I'm sure you've got it made in the shade with all of this stuff going on right now.
I have a wine company I've been trying to sell for 6 months, and they're telling me otherwise, but I don't know what they're doing.
Really? So what that's an interesting thing to hear, because you would think that because they're, liquor stores were considered essential in, as far as I'm aware, every state. So,
The argument I'm getting is companies are on spending freezes because of the unknown. And my husband's company is just as guilty of it. I was not allowing him to spend any money on anything for the business because in a situation like this, or like it was maybe when it first happened and we were faced with a lot of unknowns, cash is king. So you wanna hold on to all your cash and not spend a fucking penny. Like, quite frankly, like, you don't want to spend any money.
Are you seeing businesses start to loosen that restriction now that we're theoretically we're coming out of the other side of this at this point? I mean, even in New Jersey, we've been locked down for a long time, and as of 2 days ago, the stay-at-home order was lifted. Now you can have indoor gatherings up to 50 people or 25% of the capacity.
100.
No. Oh, is it 100 now?
Outdoor gatherings, you can do up to 100.
Yeah. Well, I said indoor.
Oh, indoor, I didn't even know it was at 50.
So indoor, it's 50 people or 25% of the building's capacity, whichever is smaller. So if your capacity is, I don't know, 10 people, you can only have, 2.5 people in there. Chop one of them in half.
Well, or you could be there because you're half a person height anyway.
Well, that's something that is irrelevant in this situation.
I did not leave that out. I'm sorry.
And now we see the real you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
You tee me up. I got it. That was like right there.
Yeah. I got you. That's all right. That's all right. But so where was I? Oh, are you starting to see businesses now that we're starting to see economic restrictions lifted and things like that? Are you starting to see businesses that are, having a little bit more confidence in moving forward?
They're not spending money. Other businesses are not spending money the way I would have expected right now. My husband's spending money. He's buying tents, but they're getting rented out. So I think it's like an even kind of spend for him. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I do not see clients spending money as loosely as I would have expected. But I had a bad day prospecting in terms of for myself. So maybe I might be jaded. I got a lot of emails not responded to. So it was just kind of, I might be salty.
Are you still seeing a lot of people have like out of office, or we're not going to be operating between, these dates or something like that?
Yeah. And, and I think a lot of the concern, and I even had it for my husband's business, it's not even the allotment of what you're allowed to do in the state of New Jersey, like in terms of the restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
It's the employees probably using some of these rules against people.
How so?
In terms of the employees saying they're not comfortable. I mean, look at how we're so sensitive to it now. I'm not trying to be coy. Like, I'm not trying to desensitize or make it unimportant. I'm really not.
No, I think it's very important.
I can use this as a crutch for as long as they can.
I mean, you see a lot of people that are working from home now that are probably in the next couple of months going to be very reluctant to want to go back to a physical office. How do you, as someone who helps coach businesses through that, like, what do you see as the best path forward in a situation like that where, you basically have to choose between essentially say to employees, all right, well, you now have to choose between your livelihood and staying at home. How do you
they're going to have to lean on what the state allows. I mean, that's what's going to have to happen, because what you could have said in that sentence was your livelihood or your life, because some of these people are going to claim fear of their life in terms of if they get sick with coronavirus. That's
Sure.
the argument. So how do you argue fear of getting sick that they could die? You know, like that's a real hard conversation to argue. For me, it's gonna be the data and the information that comes out from the state of New Jersey. I mean, it's tough. I mean, this is something we've never faced before.
So let me ask you this: when a company, let's say a small business owner decides, okay, the restrictions have been lifted, we're able to open back up, we're going back to work in whatever capacity we're going back to work in, and an employee says, no, I don't feel comfortable with this, which is within their right. But as a business owner, you need to fill that spot. You need let's say your entire husband's staff said, we don't feel comfortable doing what you're asking us to do because it involves X, Y, and Z. But you need a physical person there to help you do what you need to do. Your husband owns a party rental company. So if someone orders a tent, and you need 5 people to set up a tent. I don't know how many people it takes to set up a tent, but let's just say it's 5. And one of those people decides, you know what, I don't feel comfortable.
5 and a half. So 5 and a franc.
Yeah. No, but seriously, let's say 4 of those people are like, yeah, good. We're ready to go. Let's rock and roll. And one of them is like, I don't feel comfortable with this. What do you do? You need that extra person there. Do you have to keep that person on staff? Since
you're soliciting free advice, because technically this is something that I would say that is a great question, and that is why you need my HR resources to answer that sort of a question. But since you're asking a free question, the way the law reads, if the restriction is lifted and you are legally allowed to conduct business in whatever way you want to conduct business, so if that employee is allowed to be there, and you offer them their job back at full hours, salary, same as business as usual prior to the pandemic, and they refuse the job, then they are refusing the job, and you can go and replace them. Taking it one step further, that is actually something that you can get forgiveness on for still with the PPP loan, because that was a major concern for people as they were trying to hire people back because of some of the parameters with the PPP loan. And if they were refusing their job back, they're like, what? So I'm not going to get this loan forgiven? So that is definitely a leniency that is being extended to people.
I'm not sure how in depth you want to go with this, but now from an employee standpoint, does that affect their unemployment if they refuse if you offer them their job back?
And they'll collect. I mean, I don't know if it goes down to the perspective of if a business owner calls the state unemployment. I mean, just today I had somebody claim unemployment on my husband's business that we don't know. And they were claiming it on one of our ex-employees' social security numbers. So it could have been fraudulent. So we notified that employee who had that social security number, and they needed to notify the state of New Jersey, and now we're kind of required to also notify.
Well, that's kind of a unique situation too, because there's fraud involved, or suspected fraud involved.
Fraud. I mean, our employee could have given us the social security number wrong. I don't even know.
Yeah, I mean, barring that there was something done illegally, because fraud is illegal. If you offer them their job, they refuse, who pays their unemployment?
So, unfortunately, the initial
we're losing you.
The recent employers. It goes back. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but yep, you're good now. I'm going to need you to start that whole answer over. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Unfortunately, it goes past a couple of previous employers. So it goes past your most recent employer and maybe like 2 prior. I'm not positive. It's always by length of service. Okay. I don't know the details to how unemployment claims are filed. But I do know that, my husband owns a seasonal business. So every season we lay off several employees, and that goes against our state unemployment tax. And unfortunately, it's a reality for us. I kind of associate it to the cost of doing business because we're a seasonal business. I'm sure maybe there's better ways to do it. It's definitely something I need to consider, especially as my payroll rises in terms of total costs and my state unemployment tax rate, because it's a rate. It's the only controllable tax a business owner has.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the max in New Jersey is like 11%. So if you have a payroll of 2 million times 11%, you're talking a lot of frickin' money.
Yeah, that's not a small number.
It's not, and it's the only controllable tax you have. And the lowest in the New Jersey, I think, is like 2%.
Right.
So it's definitely something that business owners need to be cognizant of. So the more unemployment claims you get, it's kind of the worst. But
well, yeah, that makes sense.
We're in a precarious situation because we own a seasonal business. So every year we have to lay off employees. So I don't know. There's other avenues that are developing in New Jersey.
Like what?
Like employee leasing, like PEOs, but it's not often a good fit.
So how does something like that work? You're leasing an employee. Is it like a staffing company?
It's not a staffing company. So a PEO, which I am not an expert on. My company and my manager will tell you I am not a PEO expert in any way, shape, or form. I do not sell PEO. I'm not good at it, but I know it has its advantages. Is what happens is you go under another larger company's tax ID. So when I say employee leasing, what that means is my employees at the end of the year would get a W-2 from the larger company that I'm a part of in the PEO.
So sort of like a union, but for businesses, for the purposes of.
I would be careful using the term union.
Well, I'm using it very loosely.
Yeah, I wouldn't use
it. It's
almost like a conglomerate. Like
right.
I'm becoming a part of I'm going under their umbrella.
Better word would be a co-op.
Right.
Like a cooperative. Yeah. Did you say a cult?
I thought you said
a cult. No, not a cult.
I was like a cult.
A co-op, like a group of businesses that have said, listen, we all want to pool our resources for the purposes of having better what's the term?
They're not even pooling their resources. You're going under a larger company's tax ID because it's the numbers are saturated.
Strengthened numbers.
Yeah, they're so big that your unemployment rate's going to be lower, your workers' comp rate's going to be lower, you're going to get better prices on benefits because it's a larger group.
Right. So you get you get more bargaining power, essentially.
Yeah. Unfortunately, often, first of all, PEO is not very strong in New Jersey. It's big in Florida and Texas. It's not that strong here in New Jersey. There's just a lot more restrictions. So often the administrative costs do not long-term outweigh. Like if I'm looking at it from a business owner's perspective, if I'm out looking at it as the company that sells it, I'm not going to say this. But from a business owner's perspective, often your savings, like the juice is not worth the squeeze. Because before you know it, your administrative costs outweigh your savings in those benefit buckets, in those workers' comp buckets, in those state unemployment tax buckets.
Right. No, that makes sense. So then when you sit in front of a prospective client and you're talking about all the things that you guys offer, what does that whole process look like? What do they get when they come on board with you? Like what advantage do they have to having the conversation with you? What do you propose as an area that you're able to help them or help them grow their business or improve aspects of their business and things like that?
So, I mean, in a nutshell, like a quick elevator pitch, kind of just to wrap even the conversation up is really this. It's you go into your business doing what you do and doing it well. Where we step in is saying, there's things that you're already going to outsource to us anyway that you want to outsource because it's just not worth your time. So things like payroll, 401k administration, because benefits, especially now as we're looking at the workplace and trying to get good quality, high caliber talent into the workplace, benefits are going to be a big part of the conversation. So outsourcing your payroll, outsourcing your benefits administration, but then more importantly, your HR. So we're dealing with your onboarding. We're dealing with communicating all the proper policies and procedures, especially in respect to COVID. Because now it's like HR in general is under a microscope. I mean, I've never been busier in terms of people not knowing and being confused, because once the waters are muddied, everybody's in a tizzy. So the water could not be muddier because of COVID. It just like, it's dirty. It's like Naked and Afraid dirty water. It's like the water is as dirty as it's gonna get. So that's where we really come into play in terms of you run your business, you generate revenue, you focus your time on things that are worth your while, work on your business versus for your business. And then we take all of that administrative burden off your plate and all the nightmare situations that you just don't want to deal with because they're not the best use of your time, nor are you good at it. And that's really where we come into play. And sometimes our solution is a long-term solution. Sometimes we become companies' full-blown HR departments, and we are their HR infrastructure, and this is what we are ongoing. And sometimes we're a short-term solution because some businesses don't have anything in place, and they don't have a ton of ongoing HR need because they're small, but they need to get something in place because the reality is that it's what it's kind of expected of them at this point, and we can help with that too.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it sounds like what you guys do is come in and you're basically, for a small to medium-sized business, you become their HR department and allow them to operate the same way that they have, but with a lot more robust resources
right
at their disposal.
Right.
So
I will say one caveat to that is a lot of times we become a resource if you're a larger company that has an HR director or an HR department. We're really good for those people as well, in the sense that they want resources and they want technology, because we bring a lot of technology to the plate as well. And some of that, if you're looking at it very antiquated and a la carte, it's really cumbersome and it doesn't make sense. So a lot of times, even if a company has an HR department or that an HR director, we can come into play to become a valuable resource for them in terms of developing a streamlined processes and procedures, even from a technology aspect.
So is there a type of client in particular that's like the best fit for this type of practice or this type of product? Or is it really just a matter of sitting down and having a conversation and seeing if they're, maybe one type of business in a particular industry is good and another type of business or another business in the same industry may not be a great fit?
Really, the way I look at my job is sitting down with a client and talking to them about what their needs are and what their issues are. And I've always done this, and I don't know if this is good because at the end of the day, I'm a salesperson, but I do take a very consultative approach. And I can sit with a business that has 5 employees and say, we're going to create an HR infrastructure for you, and you can be hands off as much as you want, and this can be done for you. Or I can speak with a client with 85 employees and they have an HR department and they have an HR director and they really just need the technology piece and they need different resources. It really is not a one-size-fits-all solution. And that's okay. And we can be very adaptive to that. It really just depends on the situation.
So it really, you can make it fit whoever it needs to if it's something that they want to invest in.
Right. And we'll find a way to make it work. I mean, one thing luckily for me, I can see both sides of the coin. So cost is always something that's very, prevalent and important to me. And I'm a big believer in value. So if the value is there, I believe in my service and my products and my solutions. So I'm never going to devalue them, but I'm going to find a way to make it make sense. So if it is strictly a technology solution versus we're coming in and we're doing something soup to nuts and your resources are limited, it really just depends. We find a way to make it sense. And pricing is always developed based on size.
Right.
But we're not somebody that's going to take advantage of the little guy or take advantage of the big guy. We find a way to make it make sense based on needs and a lot of things.
So there's a question that actually came in from the live chat. Is data privacy a common concern for businesses that are having conversations with you? So if they're outsourcing their HR services, does the privacy of the information that they're giving you, do you see that as a concern?
That's a really good conversation. You mean the conversations that they're having with us in terms of like the honest truth of some of the dialogue between our business owners and like our HR professionals, or data concerns in terms of the privacy of the information, like, because there's a couple different ways to interpret data concerns. Like,
I mean, I would look at both personally.
Versus, okay. Well, and our HR professionals are really our HR professionals. I mean, it's funny because people in the HR world are it's like a different breed. I mean, we're like so cognizant of everything, except for me. Like, clearly I just say whatever. But if you're a true HR professional that is working with our clients, it is not me. I am the consultant. You're not getting assigned to me because clearly I mouth off at everything. But they are, it's literally, I don't want to say it's almost like a legal agreement because that wouldn't be fair. But there's definitely a sensitivity to the information that is not something there is security measures in place. Like, our HR professionals will really only conduct or have conversations with the business owner or somebody who is assigned by the business owner.
So you're not going in and actually having the conversations with employees or collecting employee data or anything like that?
We're collecting employee data in the sense of it's often inputted into our systems for the purposes of use.
What kind of use?
I mean, even generating payroll.
Okay, so you're also running payroll for
Yes,
these businesses as well.
Absolutely. So that data is collected for the purposes of something. It's protected 100%. I mean, the security measures you need to take to get into our system are elaborate.
Has there ever been can you ever remember a time where there was a data breach? Or was there ever a data breach?
But we have had phishing attempts, but we have not. In my time at my company, we have not had a data breach.
I mean, you could say where you work. I mean, it's a large company.
I work for Paychex, yes. We have not had a data breach. I can attest to having phishing attempts, but we go through very strict parameters in terms of trainings and development from an employee level on even how to see when we could be having it. I remember one distinguishedly, like a phishing attempt. And we are trained on how to respond to those situations. I think the more sensitive thing is the conversations between the business owner or the point of contact and their HR professional. That is private information. That is not information that can be spoken, because that is a consultant for the business and the business owner.
So sort of like a employee client privilege with like a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. Exactly. They're required to keep that information to themselves, essentially.
Yes. That is one of the things that I was confused about in the question was especially in New York, we're starting to see a huge interest in data security in terms of just cybersecurity in general. Like businesses that are concerned about cybersecurity, whether it's customers' credit cards or anything like that. So we're seeing an uptick of that, and in our PEO service model, which is
Interesting. So are there precautions that are being taken to help protect them? Or are there like trainings or things like that you guys provide?
In our PEO service model, we are offering services for cybersecurity for things like that, but not in our regular HR service model. But it falls into our PEO service model, which is the employee leasing that I touched on, where a business would go under a larger company's Fed ID. So in this conversation, it would be a company going under Paychex's Fed ID and becoming a part of Paychex's PEO. And I think in that point, they would be getting the cybersecurity measures that are being allocated to our clients.
So there is you do offer protection for that, for external. Obviously, ideally it's never going to come from you guys, but there is a way for them to have you guys help them with what they're doing in order to have that extra layer of protection.
Yeah, because a lot of business owners are starting even to see their own computers get hacked. And
sure.
And
did speaking?
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go on.
If you're not a Fortune 500 company and your computer gets hacked, and you don't have an IT department, that's a major concern for you.
Sure. Have you seen a lot more companies, since everybody's been working from home, have you seen more companies having issues with that?
No, but I do think it's happening in New York. I'm not in the New York market. I'm in the Jersey market. And I think it's happening a lot more in New York because I think that those employees were working remotely already anyway. A lot of them.
Right. So you haven't seen the uptick yet as far as
like I haven't had client engagement about it, but I know that they have in New York.
One more question. With you guys, can employees request access to their data held by HR services directly, or do they need to go through their business?
No. So there's two portals. One is administrator portal. The other is the employee portal. So depending on what service model the business is on, if you're on like the HR service model where there's like a learning management center or an LMS, and you're doing like performance evaluations and things of that nature, that data can be stored in there and it can be a privilege to you to see, like you can see it, or you always as an employee view, you can always see your W-2s and your pay slips and your time off. It really depends on what the business structures for you.
But in other words, you're able to, like, any information that you guys gather on an employee, they're able to go through their portal and
100%.
view it themselves.
Quite frankly, it's coming from the employee, right?
Right.
So they can see it. Yes, because often they're inputting it themselves. If the business owner is doing it through certain platforms, like an onboarding platform or something of that nature.
Right. So basically, to answer your question, essentially, if there's information in the system that your company has on it, they have access to it, and it's something that's not kept from them, and they have direct access to it.
Well, a lot of that information is just their own, I mean, it's not as like complicit as like anything crazy.
How many kids do you have, and what are their ages, and where do they go to school?
Right. It can be something as basic as your name, social.
Right. Oh, we're losing you again.
It's just the last four of your social.
Right.
It depends.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. And yeah, absolutely. Definitely happy to ask. That's why we have her on. So let one last question. With everything that's going on right now and what's pertinent to, I guess, businesses in New Jersey, Is there any one particular thing that you think is helping businesses either recover or move forward more effectively than anything else? I know that's a very broad question, but still.
No, that is a good question. Trying to think. What's helping them move forward? I I don't really know how to answer that question because I think business owners are doing it for themselves. I think there's nothing that's helping them move forward. I think they're doing it for themselves. I think if you're a business owner, you became a business owner for yourself. And if you're moving forward through this, you're doing it for yourself. There's nobody that's helping you. If anybody that's helping you in terms of support, it's your family. It's the people closest to you. It's not, quite frankly, or maybe you're driven by your employees. Like at the end of the day, when this all first started happening and I looked at my husband, I said, we have some families to help support.
Right.
You know, when you're a business owner, that's what you're thinking about. You know, you're thinking about depending on the type of business owner you are. Some business owners are jaded.
Well, I'm going to go with most business owners are thinking that way. I can speak to my own personal experience. Like one company that I dealt with, a mechanic shop that my car was in, when I spoke to him right as everything was starting to get shut down, I said to him, I was like, listen, what's going on? Like, what do you have a plan as far? I wasn't trying to pressure him into anything one way or another. I just wanted to kind of know for myself, like, am I going to be getting my car back in the next 6 months, or should I just plan on not seeing it for a while, you know? And he kind of said something similar to what you just said, as far as he's like, I've got, 3 or 4 employees, and I'm responsible for making sure their families are fed. They've got a roof over their heads and things like that. And he goes, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that, we can press on as effectively as possible, because I have that responsibility to them. I took on that responsibility when I opened up my shop, and, I can't abandon them. So yeah, I think you're right. I think more businesses are taking that approach, or more business owners rather.
And it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword because to a certain point, it's like, well, how much obligation do you really have? Because at the end of the day, to your point earlier, you take on all the risk when you start your business.
Sure. Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's a delicate line, but I do feel that we have an amazing team in my husband's business. And I think a lot of businesses feel like they have amazing teams. And you feel a certain amount of accountability to those people. And you do what you can for them. So I think that looking at this, what drives us and pushes you forward is your own self, but then also thinking about the people that have joined your team. And I think that's a huge part of it as well.
Actually, we've got another question from chat. And I think that you'll like this one. How easy is it for businesses to test the waters with outsourcing their HR services? For example, are there short-term contracts? Are there penalties for canceling, charging providers, things like that?
Well, first of all, whoever that person is, if you're thinking about pursuing Paychex for your resources, you better call me.
I will be so just to put this out there. I'll make sure that Sam's information, her business contact information, is in the description when this gets posted. And if you have more questions, it's definitely it's a fair question for sure. And I think that it warrants a deeper conversation than what we can have.
No, it's an excellent. So the way it does work is I truly actually really like this about it, because I'm a huge advocate of value, right? So if the value is not there, I want to be able to be like, see ya, you're gone. So there's no like length of contract. It's always hinged What I love too about the service model is it's a bundled service model. So it includes your payroll costs, which you're probably already doing anyway, and then any other ancillaries through your major payroll provider. But then we put on the HR aspect of it as well. So it's a bundled service model, and you're not obligated for any length of time. But if you have certain goals that you want to meet, I do like to be transparent about how long that typically takes.
How long does it typically take to accomplish?
I mean, to develop a
common
handbook
goals?
soup to nuts, it's probably going to take about 3 months because there's a lot of things that you're going to have conversations about. I mean, there's things people don't think of. There's things that come up when you first connect with one of our HR professionals that you're not, that are just, you're not thinking about them. You're just, because you don't know what you don't know.
Sure.
So the conversation, it changes, but I will say you're not locked into any contract. I am very straightforward with that. So if you run your first payroll and your connection with your HR professional is not there, I would ask that you connect with me, because I would potentially say, let's get you reassigned to somebody else. But I also like to set the real expectations of, to develop a handbook, a legally reviewed handbook, that takes at least about 3 months, because we partner, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say some of these names, but we do I'm not going to say the name, but we do partner with a labor attorney, a large labor attorney that approves anything that we do in terms of like handbooks, policies, procedures. So that does go through a process. But you're not obligated for any length of time, which I love, because if it's not working, then see ya. But you do want to also give it a fair shot in terms of time, because some of these things aren't just spit out at you overnight.
Yeah. So it's a process. In other words, like, they can walk away at any point, but realistically, it's going to be.
There's also a level of employee engagement that needs to take place.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Trainings for managers. We do, a lot of employee development, which is huge, because when you think about running a business and running a business effectively and efficiently, there's a certain level of delegation that needs to come into play. So if you want to empower your managers, just because one of your managers is really good at doing one specific task doesn't mean they're a good manager. So we do a lot of managerial training as well.
So you can actually help bring elevate the level of the staff that they already have, so that they don't have to worry about things like that as well.
That's a huge part of what we do. I probably didn't talk about it enough, but the employee development and engagement and improvement is really a huge part of what I do. One of the examples that I give to people is, if you have an employee and you were going to rank them from a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being least productive, 10 being the most productive, you were going to give them a 5 or a 6. That means 40% of what you're paying them is going out the window.
That's an interesting way to think about it.
So when I talk to a business owner about ROI on my service model, if I'm going to improve your employee's productivity and you pay that employee $100,000 a year and 40% of what you pay them is going out the window, you've just paid for my service model times 100.
Wow. That's pretty powerful that you can, say that to someone with any degree of confidence and really help them. Well, I know we can hear it.
I feel very
I can hear it. I mean, it's
huge. I think it's so important, because if you really look at the productivity and the efficiency and the effectivity of your employees, if they're not producing it at max, if they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants, that means that a huge amount of what you pay them is waste.
How do you feel about these technologies now that are becoming more and more popular, that they're more or less like babysitting software that companies are having people install on their computers at home? Like, an extreme example would be a company that requires you to stream your workspace during the time that you're working, so that they can at any time look and see what you're doing and see that you're sitting at your desk at home. How do you feel about things like that?
Well, there's two laterals to look at that. I mean, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. That's one way of looking at it.
Which I'm sure is the approach that the business would take.
I mean, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. But say you're not doing everything the right way, but your productivity or your numbers or your performance speaks differently, it's sufficient to whatever you're doing, then you're fine. I'm very performance driven. I'm very much looking at, if you want to work 4 days a week and get done what you're supposed to do in 4 days, do it.
So you're not saying, what you had mentioned before was, let's say you're not doing everything exactly right. You're not talking about someone doing something ethically wrong. You're just saying, I'm
just saying, like, I'll give you an example.
Sure.
If you have a company, if you're in sales like I am, and you're supposed to make X amount of calls, X amount of emails, X amount of LinkedIn messages, X amount of whatever, and you're not doing it, and your numbers suck, yeah, you're going to be held accountable to that. If you're not doing that, but your numbers, as long as you're meeting the measures of requirement in terms of being an employee that you're obligated to, I don't really care how you get there. If it's not numbers and you're required to do things, then quite frankly, you're required to do things. And if you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't care. If that's your job, take performance and sales out of it. It's hard for me to comprehend sometimes because I've been a salesperson for so long. So I always look at it as like the performance and the sales. If you're not a salesperson and you just have projects that you have to complete, or you have tasks that you're supposed to complete, then at the end of the day, that's what you need to do. Just complete those tasks, do what you need to do. I don't really care how much you're watching my computer as long as I'm completing my tasks.
Right.
If I've got nothing to hide, I've got nothing to hide.
So from your experience, how would you rate the level of dependency that most companies have on I tried to read like 4 different things at the same time and I got all messed up. From your experience, how would you rate the level of dependency that most firms have on your HR services? Do most clients opt for partial or full outsourcing? Then he also said, why would companies ask you to record your workplace at home? This is breaking most of the privacy policies. So I can actually handle that last part of the question. Unfortunately, when it comes to privacy policies and work, because I read a few articles on that my fiance sent to me, and I was blown away because apparently under the right to work and with at-will states, with specifically the privacy, the government can't spy on you or ask you to do something like that, but a company can unfortunately ask you to do something like that if that's what they believe is the best thing for their interest, unfortunately. But so back to the original question, how would you rate the level of dependency?
It depends on the business. It really does. I mean, to my point earlier, some businesses look at it completely as their HR department. Some businesses have an HR director or a minuscule HR department and they use it as a resource. It really just depends on the individual business because, even from the beginning of that conversation, there's never a one size fits all solution to any business. There just isn't. Every business is different. Every business owner is different. Everybody's strengths and weaknesses are different. There's just too many laterals for me to ever give a definitive answer on that. But you can be as reliant or as least reliant as you want to be. I just believe in value. So as long as the value is there, as long as you have a derived value from the service, that's what matters. I mean, it could be your end all be all where you're reaching out to us every day, or it could be I'm reaching out to you every quarter. I mean, as long as you feel like your derived value is there, I'm happy.
He also mentioned companies can ask things like that only if their employee policies do specify them. Yeah, you're right. It does if it's in their handbook, and the handbook, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but if it's in the handbook or not in the handbook, it's kind of, they have to go by the handbook that they put out there. So if you put out a handbook,
when you join a company, I mean, unless you're super diligent about all the stuff you're signing off on, I mean, you're kind of like signing your life away, right? So to Frank's point earlier, the government has a lot of restrictions, but when you work as an employee to a company, it's kind of a no holds bar sort of situation if you've signed off on that. If you have not signed off on that, I'd be interested to hear some of the dialogue that goes on between you and your HR department. If they would even allow you to take the job, I don't know. I mean, companies are different nowadays. I mean, I'll give you an example. I do a lot of online shopping, and I couldn't figure out why my phone kept deferring when I would do an in-store pickup to Audubon, Pennsylvania. That was the office I was reporting out of. My phone had all that crap on it that was putting me in Audubon, Pennsylvania. So they know everything. And I signed off on it. So if I were to ever complain at it at any point, I don't have
kind of SOL.
Stand on. Yeah. You know, so it is what it is. But again, I've got nothing to hide, so I don't really care.
Oh, this isn't it. Yeah. This is an interesting question.
Okay.
If a company is fully dependent on your HR services and your business goes bankrupt tomorrow, what happens? Do you guys work with companies to ensure contingency plans are in place, and how to handle? I guess the question is really, what happens if your company goes under tomorrow?
Paychecks?
Yeah.
Or that person's company?
No. So let's say someone's paid for their service and Paychecks disappears. I think that's the way I'm reading it. Yeah. If the company is fully compliant.
Okay. I will tell you that, I mean, Paychecks is, I can't comfortably answer that question because
that's fair.
I don't see Paychecks going under anytime soon.
Just for reference, Paychecks is a company that I believe just passed the $3 billion in revenue threshold. So they're a fairly large company.
Yeah.
It's not a, fly by the seat of your pants.
But to maybe his question, we're not going to take responsibility of another company's bankruptcy. What does happen is if you were to go bankrupt and you were to close your company and open a new company, we would still take, it's a client privilege.
Well, no, I think the way that I'm reading, this is more, like, to put it in another context, like let's say you put your money in a bank and the bank gets robbed, kind of thing. What happens to your money?
That would be a good question if we were a smaller payroll provider, because I've had to go against that in many situations. Mm-hmm. I've had many clients, unfortunately, come to me because of the smaller payroll provider has gone under and their tax liability has been incurred because that company has filed for bankruptcy, so all debt is forgiven, so then they've had to pay their taxes again. I've seen that on my side, looking at clients that have worked with smaller businesses. Is anything indefinite? Is anything finite? No, I can't.
No, that's fair. I think that would probably be a better question for the HR professionals that you're having actually come out. Oop, you're breaking up.
I don't even know. Yeah.
No,
I
that's
can't
totally fair.
answer that the right way. I don't know. I wish I could because I'm somebody that likes to hug and kiss every question, but I can't.
No, that's I appreciate you being candid about that and not trying to make up an answer.
Yeah, I'm like I don't know, but we're a $3 billion company, and
Yeah.
I'm really probably not even supposed to be like my intent was not to even say my company's name because I I don't even know if I should.
No, I think actually, I think it's better that you did because it does carry weight. I mean, it's not like you're working for I used the term before, a fly by night type of operation. You're the name Paychex carries weight in that world, and the fact that they're willing to risk their name and reputation. You said that they've never had a data breach. They've never, um,
I don't know if they've never had a data breach. They haven't had a data breach. I've been with Paychex for
okay,
7
fair enough, fair enough.
We've had some
Um,
attempts. I don't think we've had a data breach. I don't know. Nothing of
well,
magnitude that I've heard of. And prior to 7 years, how much data could you really have gotten? You know, I don't even think we were that sufficient. I don't know. It just depends. I
oh,
mean,
that's
my drink is getting lower. I'm getting drunker and looser, and I'm just telling you everything. So it doesn't
all
really
right.
matter.
So we are running out of time either way. So we'll end it there. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that your business contact information is in the description for all of this. So
I
that
am on
anybody that,
LinkedIn.
what's your
My
LinkedIn
Samantha Paredes, Paredes
on LinkedIn?
on
Do you
LinkedIn.
want to
I do
put your?
not. What?
I was just going to ask if you wanted to put your work email out there.
I don't.
Okay, fair enough. Well, thank you for taking some time out of your night. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the great questions. This has been fun.
Yes,
And
it
next
has.
time, we're going to get my husband here.
I would love to hear his perspective because he is a small business owner and he can give us
He's a small
firsthand.
business owner, and he is super direct, if not more.
And if I remember correctly, he was on your service at one point, or
He's
still is.
been on my service. He's been on my service several times. We have helped him with a variety of things because he has had his own issues. Love him to death, but yeah,
So next
no,
time we'll have him.
that would be great.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you.
So thank you again, and thank you everybody in chat. I appreciate you guys hanging out.
Bye, guys.
And we'll talk to you later.
All right.